All right, in-depth chart every day. Talk about a different position group. We got 3 more to go. Linebackers today, corners tomorrow, safeties on Friday, and that'll wrap that segment. And so I want to talk about the linebackers today because I wrote this morning before I went to practice, and I was a little surprised at who the starting linebackers were on the first day of practice and no pads in the 11-on-0 drill, which doesn't mean everything, but it certainly meant something as we were out there. You lose Greg Penn, who has been a 3-year starter, consummate team guy, wore 18 last year, was playing with broken ribs last year, didn't sit out the bowl game, was a guy that came out for interviews just about every single week. Like Mason Taylor and Greg Penn were out there almost every week. And he isn't the most talented player that's ever played at LSU, wasn't the most productive player that ever played at LSU, but was a solid piece to the middle of your defense really for 3 years. He started 4 games at LSU, had 274 tackles, 17.5 for loss, 5.5 sacks. And he moves on. Wasn't drafted, tried to continue his football playing career as an undrafted free agent, but you lose him to graduation, and then you lose Xavier Adkins, who transferred to Auburn after 1 year in the program. I know that's one that LSU fans would have liked to have back, but he moves on to Auburn. So what do you have back from last year's team at linebacker? You got Whit Weeks, who's preseason All-American. You got Harold Perkins, who has been an All-American and a 2-time All-SEC player. And then you got West Weeks, Whit's older brother, Devon Keys, who was kind of thrust into action last year. You lost Harold Perkins, and then West Weeks got hurt. So Devon Keys kind of had to play. And he did admirably. The biggest play he made was probably the tip ball pick 6 against Baylor, which was right place, right time. But he did catch the ball and outrun the Baylor offense to the goal line. But he made some plays. He started 4 games, and he's now got a little bit more seasoning than he probably would have had if you had stayed healthy last year. And then you've got Tylen Singleton back, who was a 4-star recruit out of Manny. Was a little bit undersized last year. I will tell you this. I was at practice today. He's not really undersized anymore. Tylen Singleton is a pretty put-together dude. I think he was working at the Star today a little bit, and that's backing up Harold Perkins. You may see a safety come down there if Perkins were to go out, but Singleton was kind of working there. He's a really good athlete, runs really well. So that's what you've got back. Whit Weeks, West Weeks, Harold Perkins, Devon Keys, Tylen Singleton. And then you bring in a host of freshmen, 5 of them. And I don't know if it was because you brought in 5 freshmen that you didn't go into the portal, or it's because you feel that good about the 5 guys you've got back that you didn't go to the portal. But there were only 2 of the position groups that LSU did not dip into the transfer portal for when you look at the starting 22 on offense and defense. You got Van Buren at quarterback. You got a host of wide receivers. You got a couple starting offensive linemen. You got a tight end. You got defensive tackles, 2 of them. You got 3 edge guys. You grabbed a couple of DBs who can do various things in Delane and Cooley. Certainly got Jakeem Jackson as well. Like, you got every position except linebacker and running back you added in the portal. And I'm not sure what that tells me about linebacker, but they've got numbers there. That's just really young with 5 true freshmen. You got Zach Weeks, who's the biggest of the Weeks, by the way. If you look at the LSU listed depth chart, he's 6'3", 230. Witt's 6'2", 225, and West is 6'2", 235. So if you look at just height and bulk, he's the biggest. Then you got Charles Ross, who was running with the 2s today. Charles Ross, listen to this. He came in the spring. He was the top rated of these 5 true freshman linebackers. 6'1", 225, and ran track in Texas. There's a video from Shea Dixon's Twitter from a couple of years ago that has Charles Ross running the 100 meters next to one of the fastest guys that LSU's ever signed in their program in Jelani Watkins, who ran the 6th fastest time in LSU history as a freshman this past track season. And Charles Ross is in that breath. He was apparently clocked in the 4.4s in the 40 as a high school senior. He was certainly in a Texas track meet, clocked at 10.36 in the 100 meters. He can fly, and he's 230 pounds. So that's a guy that LSU is very excited about, who is a true freshman in this group. You've also got Jaden Breaker, who's a solid out-of-state linebacker who's 220 pounds. You got Keelan Moses, who was at practice today and dropped a pick 6 that he undercut a route and looked like he was going to catch it and take it back the other way for a touchdown. He just dropped it. And you got C.J. Jim Coyley, who's also 6'3", as well, 220 pounds. So 5 true freshman linebackers kind of led by Charles Ross. But if you went out to practice today, which I did, you saw Whit Weeks and West Weeks working as the first team in the inside with Perkins out at the star. And then you saw Charles Ross and Devon Keys working on the inside with Tylen Singleton at times out at the star, which makes sense in terms of the guys that you were going to see. That counts all 5 of the guys who were coming back, and it accounts for Charles Ross, who's the best of the true freshmen. And I think that is one of those depth chart things that I can look at and go, that's probably correct. Because Ross is the most talented freshman, and he was here in the spring. And then you got 5 returners. If you got 6 spots, 2 deep of 3 each, that makes the most sense. So that is the core that you're looking at. And so if you look at it closely, like Whit Weeks, if he's healthy, is going to make 120 tackles. He's going to be a first-team All-SEC player. He's going to be mentioned for All-American honors, and he's going to be an early draft pick. Like, he is a guy you don't have to worry about. It's interesting, and I looked at his Pro Football Focus grades, that Whit Weeks had 3 bad tackling games, like that were in red on Pro Football Focus. It were bad. UCLA was one of them. Who cares? They were atrocious. LSU crushed them. But he was really bad tackling against Texas A&M. He was really bad tackling against Florida, according to Pro Football Focus. In fact, like bad. 32.7 grade against Texas A&M, 35.5 against Florida. And those 2 teams combined to run for 355 yards and 7 touchdowns on 5.5 yards per carry against LSU. Like, LSU needs Whit Weeks week in and week out to be excellent. They just do. They've got to have him. And I have confidence he'll be that guy. And whether it's West or Keys opposite him, you need production from that guy. West was hurt last year, so you don't really know. He hasn't played a ton at LSU. He's been mainly a special teams guy. And Devon Keys did start some games last year when West was hurt. So that's going to be a competition. I would imagine they'll both play. I think they'll both play at Clemson. I think Keys is probably the guy. But certainly there may be something to having 2 brothers in there in the interior that know what each other's doing and can read each other's minds. But that's kind of the guys that you're jostling for position for there in the middle. And then you got Perkins on the outside. And we are now 4 years into this discussion. What do you do with Harold Perkins? And we've had this 50, 60, 80, 90 times. And to me, you've got to get him involved and you've got to let him run. So to me, the only unacceptable answer is to put him in the middle of the field and have him catch guards and tackles for 4 quarters. Like, that is the only unacceptable scenario to me. I think he's okay covering a little bit. I think he certainly needs to be rushing the passer a lot. I got the numbers from Pro Football Focus. He, as a freshman, had a 90.9 pass rush grade on 163 snaps. 90.9. That is massively high. You almost never see any scores in the 90s. That's his season-long pass rush grade, 163 rushes. The next year, he had 162 rushes, 1 less, but right on par. The difference is he played a lot more snaps. Instead of dropping into coverage 130 times, which he did as a freshman, as a sophomore, he dropped into coverage 291 times. That's an increase of 161. He was just in coverage a lot. And we know that Florida State that year schemed him out of the box. They knew where he was going to line up. They knew he was going to be in coverage, and they put somebody out wide that he was going to have to go mark. And they took him out of the game. You can't let that happen. I've told you this before. This is where my ability to scheme and draw up X's and O's in football stops. I know that Harold Perkins was out of the box the whole game. I don't have the answer to how to get him back in. But that's Blake Baker's job. So I'm not going to give you the answer or tell you I have an easy answer because I don't. But that's what has to happen, or else you're neutering his skill set. Again, he is pretty good in coverage. He runs great. He's got good ball skills, and man, if he can get an interception, you're talking about a guy that can motor the other way. But you've got to find a way for him to be disruptive in some space, and that means rushing the passer. chasing down running backs behind the line of scrimmage, those types of things. You've got to get the offensive lineman kind of away from him. It's a hard assignment because he's not great at shedding offensive linemen, and you don't want him in coverage. So you want him just to have free runs on the quarterback and running back. Well, that's not going to happen. But you've got to find a way to scheme it up to get him free. And I think LSU will have a plan for that, and I think Harold Perkins will have a really good year. So I think LSU's running back group is very, very good. Linebacker group is very, very good. I think they've got to stay healthy, one, clearly, because you got a bunch of true freshmen standing and waiting in the wings for backups. But if you stay healthy, and Devon Keys takes a reasonable progression from year 1 to year 2, and Whit Weeks is the player he was at Virginia and early in his LSU career instead of the guy that was banged up last year. And if you can find a way to get Charles Ross involved, more power to you, because that's a freakish talent. But I'm comfortable with where LSU is at linebacker. And part of what Blake Baker's job is this year is understanding that after this year is over, Harold Perkins, Whit Weeks, and Whit Weeks are gone. And these 5 guys that you brought in, now one of them, 2 of them probably going to transfer because that's just the nature of the beast, need to be very much ready to step in with Devon Keys, Charles Ross, and that crew next year. And that's part of the discussion in program building, or else you're going to have to jump right back in the portal and fill needs. But you bring in 5 freshmen, you feel like you ought to be able to cultivate 2 or 3 of them that are very, very good players. That's down the road. But for this year, for right now, for what LSU's got to go play Clemson, the 2025 linebacking core, I like it. I think it's very, very good in Blake Baker's room at this point. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.